Hello and a warm welcome to Federal's special program, Capital Beat. In a direct impact to the US, Iran, and Israel war, domestic cooking gas prices in India have shot up, with the cost of a 14.2 kg household LPG cylinder rising up to 60 rupees, while commercial cylinders have become costlier by about 115 rupees. Now, this revision, which took effect on March 7th, comes amid rising global energy prices linked to the ongoing military conflict in West Asia. Now, according to the Indian Oil Corporation, the price of a non subsidized domestic LPG cylinder in Delhi has increased from 853 to 913 rupees. Similar increases have also been recorded in other major cities. In Mumbai, the price has gone up to 912.50 paisa, while in Kolkata, it now costs around 939. In Chennai, the revised price stands at 928.50 per cylinder. Now, the industry officials said that the increase reflects a surge in global energy costs triggered by tensions and disruptions in West Asia, but despite the hike, officials maintain that cooking gas prices in India remain lower than in several neighboring countries. Now, this increase marks the second revision in domestic LPG prices in less than a year. The last hike was in April 2025 when prices were raised by about 50 rupees. Now, the rates differ slightly across states depending on the local taxes and VAT. Now, this increase comes just a day after when Petroleum Minister Hardeep Puri said that there's nothing to worry. I'd like to put out the code graphics of what Petroleum Minister Hardeep Puri said, and if you have the graphics ready, and Abhirami, if you're there backstage, and if you can play that out. So here is what Hardeep Puri said. Our priority is to ensure the availability of affordable and sustainable fuel for our citizens, and we are doing it comfortably. There is no shortage of energy in India, and there is no cause for worry for our energy consumers. So that's what exactly we are going to ask. That if the LG, if there was nothing to worry, then why shoot up the prices? That's $1 million question. And if you remember, on this very program of Capital Beat, just a few days back, we had showed you what strategic expert Brahmachalani had very clearly said that the LPG comes through the Strait of Hormuz, and 80 to 85% of the LPG comes through Strait of Hormuz. And we do not have any LPG reserves. That's an area of concern. But this has also become a big political question. Let's put out the tweet of Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge, what he said this morning. And if we have it ready, can we have that play out, what Mallikarjun Kharge said? He said that this domestic LPG cylinder price increased by 60 rupees. Commercial LPG made a profit of 115. First, the public was robbed of the benefits of low international prices. Now the public is being squeezed by the burden of inflation. Modi government, which claims everything is fine when there is a war, is powerless to provide adequate oil, gas, and fertilizer. This is what Mallikarjun Kharge said. So this evening on this particular program, we are asking how big is this crisis as far as LPG is concerned. We'll talk about other fuels as well when it comes to petrol, diesel, and also LNG. Can India really tackle this situation? What happens to the schemes like Ujjwala gas? Will the government continue to give those benefits to the people, coming as it does? Just elections are around the corner in so many states. So it's a huge crisis which is staring at India's face at the moment. Joining me this evening is Chandra Prakash, who is the president of the All India LPG Distributors Federation. So thank you so much for joining. We have renowned economist Santosh Mehrotra joining us this evening. So thank you so much. And we have former ambassador Meera Shankar also joins us this evening. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining. And let me begin with Mr. Chandra Prakash. Sir, how big is this crisis? Petroleum Minister Hardeep Puri just a day before said that there's nothing to worry and everything is in control. But we see a price hike of 60 rupees for the household cylinder. For the commercial cylinder, it's a hike of 115 rupees. How far do we expect some more increase as the crisis deepens in West Asia?
नमस्कार। देखिए, जहाँ तक एलपीजी का अभी सप्लाई का जो और डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन का जो है, कोई शॉर्टेज नहीं है किसी किस्म की भी। जो रजिस्टर्ड उपभोक्ता हैं डोमेस्टिक सेक्टर में और कॉमर्शियल में। खास करके पर्टिकुलरली जो डोमेस्टिक सेक्टर में है उनकी बराबर सप्लाई जारी है, कोई पैनिक की जरूरत नहीं है। हमने उपभोक्ता से भी अपील करते हैं कि कोई पैनिक में बुकिंग या भाग दौड़ ना करें। जो रजिस्टर्ड कस्टमर है उनको पहले की तरह बराबर सप्लाई मिलती रहेगी। कोई जो भी थोड़ा सा इसमें डिस्टरबेंस आई है, जो गल्फ की तरफ से जो एलपीजी इंपोर्ट करती थी तेल कंपनियां, उसमें थोड़ा लड़ाई की वजह से थोड़ी बाधा है, लेकिन उसकी पूर्ति के लिए रिफाइनरी की जो कैपेसिटी बढ़ाई गई है, जो प्रोडक्शन एलपीजी की बढ़ाई गई है, उसमें उन पे जो भी ऑयल कंपनी, जो भी ये प्रोडक्शन कंपनी है, उस पे ईसी एक्ट का भी वो किया गया प्रावधान। और वो जितनी प्रोडक्शन करेंगे वो घरेलू कंजम्पशन के, घरेलू सप्लाई के लिए ही पब्लिक सेक्टर की ऑयल कंपनी को वो सप्लाई देंगी। और इसमें
सर
मैं
वो
आपको
तो सब चीज ठीक है सर, व्हाट यू आर सेइंग इज दैट वी विल ट्राई एंड मेक अप फॉर दिस शॉर्टफॉल, लेकिन प्राइसेस बढ़ाने की क्या जरूरत है? क्योंकि जब प्राइसेस बढ़ते हैं तो कॉमन मैन की जेब पर असर डायरेक्ट पड़ता है। वी आर हिटिंग एट द पॉकेट्स of the families in India. Why increase the price if the crisis is not that deep? If India is capable of tackling this crisis, then why increase the prices? Yes, sir.
देखिए जहां तक घरेलू गैस का, एलपीजी का सवाल है, पिछले 3-4 साल में सिर्फ 2 दफा प्राइस बढ़ी हैं, वो भी जबकि ऑयल कंपनी पे बहुत ज्यादा प्रेशर पड़ा और अंडर रिकवरी जो हो रही थी। क्योंकि एलपीजी की जो प्राइस है, जब भी ये करीब कोई 12, 13 या 14 को जब भी कानून चेंज हुआ था और ये जो प्राइस मैकेनिज्म चेंज करके ऑयल कंपनी की तरफ गया था, तो तब ये डिसाइड हुआ था जो इम्पोर्ट पैरिटी रेट है, इसका जो जो भी इम्पोर्ट पैरिटी की जो प्राइसिंग आएगी, उसके बेस पे आपकी डोमेस्टिक एलपीजी और कमर्शियल एलपीजी का प्राइस सेट होगा। तो ये काफ़ी देख के, क्योंकि ऑयल कंपनीज जो है वो काफ़ी इसका बर्डन उठा रही थी, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट उनको, उज्ज्वला वालों को सबको सब्सिडी मिल रही है, और जो रेगुलर है उनको भी जो मार्केट प्राइस है उससे कम पे तेल कंपनियां उनको सप्लाई कर रही थी। लेकिन अब ये नौबत आ गई क्योंकि इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में एकदम काफ़ी तेजी से उछाल आया है, तो उस वजह से थोड़ा 60 रुपीज़ बढ़ाने पड़ा। और जहाँ तक कॉमर्शियल का सवाल है, वो हर महीने घटता बढ़ता है। कभी कभी इनको महीने में, पिछले 2-3 साल में 2 दफ़ा आपके मिड मंथ में भी चेंज करना पड़ा है। तो उसके अंदर ये प्राइसिंग इसका बढ़ा, जब भी अभी 1 तारीख को थोड़ा 28 रुपये बढ़ाया, अब वो एकदम क्योंकि प्राइस इतना बढ़ा है इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में, तो उस वजह से ये आपका कॉमर्शियल का रेट बढ़ा है और मजबूरी में ये
नहीं,
60
लेकिन
रुपये
मान
तेल
लीजिए
कंपनी को
सर,
बढ़ा।
मान लीजिए कि ये क्राइसिस और ज्यादा बढ़ती है आगे और युद्ध और बड़े पैमाने पर होता है, तो आप क्या एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं कि क्या प्राइसेस और बढ़ाई जाएंगी? मान लीजिए इंटरनेशनल प्राइसेस ज्यादा
नहीं,
बढ़ती है तो फिर 60 रुपए भी बढ़ाई गई, फिर और बढ़ाई जाएंगी भारत में।
देखिए मैं इस पे, ये तो तेल कंपनियां ही बता पाएंगी, मैं इस पे कुछ नहीं बोल पाएगा कि कीमत कल को बढ़ेंगी नहीं बढ़ेंगी। अभी तो कोई प्रेडिक्ट करना मुश्किल है, क्योंकि लड़ाई कितने दिन चलेगी ये अभी भी कोई आज की तारीख में कोई फिक्स नहीं है कि ये 2 दिन चले, 10 दिन चले, 20 दिन चले। बट उम्मीद करनी चाहिए कि इसका जल्दी सोल्यूशन हो। और ये अकेले कोई भारत में ही नहीं है, इंडिया में ही नहीं है, ये बाकी के देशों में भी एलपीजी की शॉर्टेज हुई है, उनके यहाँ भी रेट बढ़े हैं, प्राइस बढ़े हैं, हमारे पड़ोस में भी बढ़े हैं, यूरोपियन कंट्री में बढ़े हैं। जहाँ जहाँ जो जो कंट्री इंपोर्ट करती हैं वो सब जगह उनका उनका रेट बढ़ा है, अकेले इंडिया में नहीं। और उम्मीद करते, देखिए करीब कोई 65% के करीब इंपोर्ट करती हैं तेल कंपनियां एलपीजी, और बाकी की कोई 35 से 38% की जो वो होम प्रोडक्शन है हमारी रिफाइनरी की, और जो भारत में जो भी एलपीजी निकलती है वो इतना है। बाकी के 60-65% के बीच में इंपोर्ट करती हैं तेल कंपनियां, उसी में डिस्टर्बेंस आई है। और वो भी सारी तेल कंपनियां और पेट्रोलियम मिनिस्ट्री कोशिश कर रही है कि उसकी पूर्ति के लिए रिफाइनरी की कैपेसिटी बढ़ा रहे हैं, वो काम शुरू भी हो गया। अब बाहर से भी जो दूसरी कंट्री से भी जो इंपोर्ट कर रहे हैं उसको आने में थोड़ा टाइम लग सकता है। बट मैं फिर आप अपने उपभोक्ताओं को, जो भी डोमेस्टिक सेक्टर में हैं, उनको आश्वस्त करना चाहता हूं कि उनको कोई दिक्कत आने वाली नहीं है। अभी
लेकिन
हाल
सर
फिलहाल
इसकी गारंटी कैसे मिलेगी कि जो गैस सिलेंडर्स हैं उनकी ब्लैक मार्केटिंग या होर्डिंग ना हो? क्योंकि अक्सर ये होता है जब प्राइसेस बढ़ने लगते हैं तो लोग होर्डिंग शुरू कर देते हैं। इन सारी चीजों से सरकार कैसे बचेगी?
एलपीजी सिलेंडर की होल्डिंग का 1% भी कोई चांस नहीं है, क्योंकि जो डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स के गोदाम है उनकी कैपेसिटी लिमिटेड है। जितने बोटलिंग प्लांट से आते हैं तेल कंपनियां उतनी ही सप्लाई देती है जितनी उनकी प्रीवियस जो उनकी जो एवरेज है वो कोई किसी को एक्सेस मतलब होर्डिंग करने के लिए कोई स्टॉक एक्सेस ले ही नहीं सकता। सारा सिस्टम ऑनलाइन है, बुकिंग भी ऑनलाइन है और कस्टमर के पास मैसेज भी जाता है। तो कोई होर्डिंग का, और किसी के गोदाम की कैपेसिटी इतनी है ही नहीं कि वो 100 सिलेंडर भी एक्स्ट्रा कोई अपने स्टोरेज कर।
सर बेसिक जो एक बात है, उसके बाद फिर मैं प्रोफेसर संतोष मेहरोत्रा और एम्बेसडर मीरा शंकर के पास जाऊंगी कि अगर इतना ही सब कुछ ठीक है और हरदीप पुरी ने भी कल कहा कि देयर इज नथिंग टू वरी एंड वी विल ट्राई एंड फुलफिल ऑल द रिक्वायरमेंट्स, तो कॉस्ट बढ़ाने की जरूरत ही क्या है? भारत एक ऐसा देश है कि जहां पर मिडिल क्लास इनकम फैमिलीज ज्यादा हैं, तो ऐसे में कॉस्ट बढ़ाने की क्या जरूरत थी? जैसा आपने आपने खुद बोला कि हमने एस्मा को लागू कर दिया है ताकि जो रिफाइनर्स है वो अपनी जो प्रोडक्शन है गैस का वो बढ़ा ले। तो अगर इतना ही गैस प्रोडक्शन बढ़ाना था तो कॉस्ट को क्यों बढ़ाया? आम आदमी की जेब पर क्यों मार पड़े?
देखिए, जो जो एलपीजी ये अभी दूसरी जगह से, दूसरी एरिया से प्रोक्योर करेंगे, वो महंगी खरीदी जा रही है। तो ऑलरेडी तेल कंपनियां, क्योंकि इसका बर्डन एलपीजी का डोमेस्टिक जो सप्लाई है उस पर ऑलरेडी एलपीजी का काफ़ी इन तेल कंपनियों पे फाइनेंशियली बर्डन है, क्योंकि घाटे में बेच रहे हैं, घाटे में दे रहे हैं। तो और घाटा ना हो, तो और जो इंटरनेशनल प्राइस अभी जो इंक्रीज हुआ है उसकी पूर्ति के लिए, और ये भी नाम मात्र है, ये पूरा रेट नहीं बढ़ाया, सिर्फ 60 रुपीज बढ़ाया है। तो इसके अंदर कोई मतलब अब आगे का फ्यूचर का तो मैं तो भविष्यवाणी कर नहीं सकता, और ये सारा तेल कंपनी वगैरह और पेट्रोल मिनिस्ट्री डिसाइड करेंगी कि कल को कोई अगर मान लीजिए ज़्यादा और भी ज़्यादा क्राइसिस आता है और प्रोक्योरमेंट की कॉस्ट बढ़ती है तो दे विल डिसाइड। लेकिन ये आपको आश्वस्त करता हूँ ना, इसमें कोई होर्डिंग का चांस है। देखिए, एलपीजी डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स जो है, इनकी बैकग्राउंड में आपको बता देता हूँ। इसमें वार विडो, वार वेटरन्स, अनएम्प्लॉयड ग्रेजुएट, अनएम्प्लॉयड इंजीनियर, एससी एसटी, आपकी वुमेन्स कैटेगरी, आपके फ्रीडम फाइटर, आपके स्पोर्ट्स कैटेगरी के मैक्सिमम जो इसमें डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर है उस बैकग्राउंड से आते हैं। तो इनकी जो भावना वो कभी भी होर्डिंग की नहीं है, और इसीलिए एलपीजी सर्विस बोलते हैं इसको, एलपीजी बिजनेस या एलपीजी ट्रेडिंग नहीं बोलते। तो इसमें आश्वासन देता हूँ, कोई ब्लैक मार्केट, देखिए पिछले कई सालों से डोमेस्टिक एलपीजी की या कॉमर्शियल की कोई ब्लैक मार्केटिंग नहीं है, ना आगे होने की कोई उम्मीद नहीं है, ना ही कोई होर्डिंग होएगी।
All right. ठीक है, आप सर बने रहिएगा हमारे साथ. Now I'll go to Professor Santosh Mehrotra. And what would you say to this LPG prices shot up, and how does India tackle this? But in fact, I wanted to come to Ambassador Meera Shankar because we have to understand, and I'll come to you, Professor Mehrotra, a little later. Ambassador Shankar, how big is this fuel crisis? If you look at the things diplomatically, just 3-4 days back, Brahmachalani had put out that, as far as LPG is concerned, there is no reserves of LPG which India has, and there is no policy to reserve LPG. Now, how difficult is the situation for a country like India in the wake of this West Asia crisis?
Look, I think India has reserves of about 25 days for petrol and crude oil, and for diesel and so on. So there is a reserve. But for gas, I think it's about 5 days to a week, because we don't really have much storage for gas. And I think there's a difference between LPG and LNG. LPG is liquefied petroleum gas, and this is made from petrol. So if we are able to ensure petroleum supplies from Russia or crude oil supplies from elsewhere, this would not be such a problem, because we would be able to manufacture most of the LPG in India from the crude oil that we are importing, provided we get it in sufficient quantities. But the LNG, the liquefied natural gas, we get much of it from the Gulf, from Qatar and some from the UAE. And there, the blockage of the Straits of Hormuz has impacted that supply. So for India, I think, ensuring sufficient supplies of crude oil so that, LPG supplies are not affected. And those are the ones which are used in the cylinders, which are provided for domestic cooking. The LNG is the piped gas, and CNG, which is compressed natural gas, which is supplied in places like Gujarat to industrial users and in certain cities by way of piped gas at home. That could be impacted, but if we don't know how long this war is going to last, whether there will be some selective opening, because Qatar has also stopped production, apart from the fact that, the ships can't exit with their load of gas because of the closure of the Straits of Hormuz and the likelihood of being shot, and insurers not being willing to take, and shippers not being willing to take that risk premium. But Qatar had also stopped production after its gas production facility was hit by Iran. So we really don't know. There's a huge sense of uncertainty. And the increase in prices has been because of the increase in prices of petrol. Petroleum prices have risen by almost 30%. I think they are over $90 a barrel now, starting from $70 a barrel just a few days ago. And there's some speculation by countries like Qatar that it could rise to well over 100 in the coming days if the conflict doesn't stop. We do meet some of our LPG requirements also from Bombay High. We produce some, not so much, and some little bit from the KG basin. So we have some domestic production. I think this is also a wake-up call for India to look at stepping up the use of renewable energy, because in the long run, that is what is not only going to give us sustainability, but is also going to give us energy independence and energy security. Renewable energies plus storage, And today, the cost of, say, solar with storage is 50%, 50 paisa less per unit in terms of tariff than a new coal-fired power plant. So, it makes commercial sense, and it certainly makes environmental sense and sense from the point of view of energy security. But we have vested interests which operate and would like to continue other forms of fuel. You've seen that in the US, where the big oil companies have struck back against the Biden administration's, prioritizing of the green economy. So I think for us, because we are so import dependent on oil and gas, that it's even perhaps a more stringent or more compelling requirement than, say, in the US, which has its own reserves of gas and oil and is no longer importing but exporting oil. But for us, where we are so heavily dependent, I think this is important. The second thing is, we don't know if the conflict is contained, then this may not be such a, such a difficult issue.
No, but ma'am, like you mentioned, condition.
If it gets prolonged, then we would have to look at how we actually impose, the kind of cuts. And there, I think, perhaps domestic consumers will be protected, and it will be, the CNG, which is used for vehicles, where they also have petrol. So, most cars have petrol plus CNG. So they could have recourse to alternative fuel for the time being and things like that. So when you have to stagger, you should look at doing it also for the power plants, because you have enough production of thermal and other power today to absorb a cut in gas supplies for power production. So you have to look at imposing those in an intelligent way. But again, I stress that the long-term solution is really speeding up the transition to a green economy.
All right. So you're talking about a transition to green economy if the crisis deepens, but you also mentioned a condition, ma'am, about that if Russia continues to supply oil and other fuels to India in an uninterrupted fashion. Just a little clarification before I go to Professor Mehrotra, that we also read reports that Russia is not very enthusiastic about giving an uninterrupted supply of fuel to India. How far is that true? And if that is the thing, then how difficult is the situation for India then?
Look, right now the Russians have said that they are willing to supply to India. So I don't see why there should be a problem. But I think that, and India should, by all rights, have recourse to oil wherever it can get it right now, and also in future should retain the right to buy oil from sources which are cheaper wherever they are, not necessarily committed to any particular source of supply, but certainly to look at where geographical convenience, where situational convenience, and where commercial convenience lies. Because making commitments, I think, where we are paying for the oil supply with our own resources, we are not taking aid, we are not taking credit. So clearly, then we should retain the autonomy of choice.
Right. All right. Let me come to Professor Mehrotra now. From the economic perspective, sir, how do you see this LPG prices shooting up? And Mr. Chandra Prakash said that we have implemented ESMA so that the refiners can expand the supply of gas and the production. But what happens to schemes like Ujjwala Gas? Can the government continue to dole out those benefits to the people? And elections are around the corner. How do you see this LPG crisis?
Before I answer your question, नीलू, मैं चंद्र प्रकाश जी से आपसे एक सवाल करना चाहता हूँ.
Yes,
प्रकाश
sir.
जी, मेरा सवाल ये है कि ये जो डिस्टिंक्शन अभी एम्बेसडर शंकर ने बहुत सही और बहुत ही आवश्यक उठाया, पाइप गैस जिसमें एलएनजी इस्तेमाल होती है और सिलेंडर वाली कुकिंग गैस जिसमें एलपीजी इस्तेमाल होती है. तो एलपीजी बनती पेट्रोल से और जो पाइप गैस है वो एलएनजी से आती है. अब सवाल ये है कि पाइप गैस जो है एलएनजी, उसका इस्तेमाल तो जाहिर है सिर्फ शहरों में हो रहा होगा, क्योंकि पाइप सारे शहरों में भी शायद नहीं है, सारे उपभोक्ताओं के पास नहीं है, सारे शहरों में नहीं. मतलब कुकिंग में जो गैस का इस्तेमाल है वो अधिकतर सिलेंडर के द्वारा ही है. ये बात सही कह रहा हूं मैं?
हाँ, बिल्कुल ठीक है.
जी भाई, ये है मतलब एक मोटी बात हमारे श्रोताओं के लिए, और मतलब पक्के तौर पे ये मैं कहना चाहता था. see this distinction here is important, and I'll dwell on this for in a minute. Now we have to appreciate that in other words, we have to make this distinction between the petroleum generated LPG, which goes into the cylinder, from the piped gas that comes into many households in at least in major cities, which of course it's expanding. And the impact on the cylinder is coming through the oil price increase. Okay, that was already pointed out by by Ambassador Shankar, that earlier the price of petroleum in the global market was in the region of $60 to $65 per barrel for Brent crude, which is the benchmark crude, and it now stands at somewhere in the region of 85. Now clearly this is going to impact the prices of imported crude oil from which LPG is manufactured. Now, that's essentially the point that Chandra Prakash ji was making, that we've got supplies of petroleum, and that our refineries are increasing their capacity to convert that petrol into gas and fill the cylinders and make that available. Now, the issue here is that because oil prices have increased and because the government does not want to bear the subsidy cost. Okay, please try and appreciate what the government is attempting to achieve. Because, okay, so you may well ask the question, why is the government not willing to bear the subsidy cost?
Yes.
So there we have to look at the entire, use of LNG as well as LPG. Now the point is that they are subsidizing for the Ujjwala, right? Okay, but Ujjwala consumers, चंद्रप्रकाश जी, उज्ज्वला कंज्यूमर हमारे देश में उसकी खपत लगभग कितनी होगी और बाकी खपत कितनी होगी?
देखिए, उज्ज्वला के जो उपभोक्ता हैं ये पिछले 10 साल में जुड़े हैं, तो इनकी ऑन एन एवरेज करीब कोई आपके 10.3 करोड़ कस्टमर जो है वो उज्ज्वला के हैं। बाकी जो हैं करीब कोई 32 करोड़ के करीब है, 33 करोड़, वो बाकी रेगुलर आपके कस्टमर्स हैं,
सिलेंडर वाले आप कह रहे हैं,
सिलेंडर वाले। तो उज्ज्वला के जो कस्टमर हैं उनकी ऑन एन एवरेज 3.5 से लेके 4.5 पर सिलेंडर ईयरली उनकी जो कंजम्पशन है। और जो आपके नॉन उज्ज्वला कस्टमर, जो रेगुलर कस्टमर जिसको हम बोलते हैं, नॉन सब्सिडाइज्ड कस्टमर, उनकी जो एवरेज जो उनकी कंजम्पशन है आपके मंथली, वो आपकी 12 से 14 किलो रफली आप कर लीजिए 1 सिलेंडर पर मंथ। किसी की 1.5 हो सकती है, किसी की 0.75 हो सकती है।
What's the takeaway from what Chandprakash ji has just told us? The takeaway is the following, that Ujjwala consumers might be 25% of all consumers of cooking gas. Yeah. However, their consumption is so much lower, and hence they probably they do not account for more than 10 to 15% of total cooking gas consumption in the country. But so the point is the government obviously is determined not to increase the burden of its subsidization. Now, I was looking at on the net for what has been the trend for subsidy on LNG. The government has dramatically reduced its outgo on subsidy from about 38,000 crores about 7 or 8 years ago to something like 1,800 crores, from 38 to 1,800. So it's dramatically reduced. Now, does it have, you can ask me the question, does the government have the fiscal space to actually do it? Well, it probably can create the fiscal space, but then you'll ask me, okay, how? If I was in government and I was making these pricing decisions, I would say the way I would do it is to begin to increase the price of urea, which is also being, you see, this LNG, this gas is being used to produce a whole series of other products. It's not just for cooking. So it's going into fertilizer production, it is going into power use, into industry, and so on. But a very big consumption, end use is fertilizer production. And our fertilizer consumption has gone up, especially the use of urea has gone up dramatically at the cost of the other two fertilizers, which also have to be applied in proper balance. The result of all this is that our, because urea is subsidized, because fertilizer is subsidized for the farmers, you get the point. Our fertilizer subsidy, and obviously underlying that is the LNG. Okay, let's just be very clear-headed about this. Underlying that is the LNG, the import of LNG. Now, clearly, if the price of LNG has risen internationally, and it has risen from something like 10 to 25 billion, MBTU or some such metric that is.
Santosh, it's gone up by almost 30%.
Okay, so 30%. Okay, so but it's gone up very significantly. So if it's gone up, the government faces the following question: what is it going to do? is it going to absorb the subsidy, absorb the cost of the subsidy, or is it going to pass it on to the consumer? The sense I'm getting is, from what's happening on the ground, is that it's obviously decided to pass it on in respect of the LPG. But
No, and also the justification, Professor Mehrotra, also the justification which is given by the government is that, look, our neighboring countries have a much higher cost when you compare it with India.
That's besides the point. I mean, as a consumer, they are worried about how much outflow there is, and because real wages are not increasing, people are taking a hit. People are complaining. That's the reason. That's the real problem. I mean, if I look at the real price of cylinder over a 10-year period, the real price, okay, when you account for inflation, because there's also inflation taking place in the economy, then the real price has not over the last 10 years increased very much. Okay, we have to, I have to present the facts. I'm sorry, I'm an economist, so we have to take the facts as they are.
I'm glad that you're explaining all this. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
However, what we can argue is that if you want to cushion the majority of the consumers, then the only way you are going to be able to do it without increasing your subsidy bill, the government, I'm talking about the government here.
Right.
Because obviously this, the supply is coming from GAIL. GAIL is a public sector company. The government does, who do they report to? The Ministry of Petroleum.
Professor Mehrotra, just want to interrupt you because the time is limited. But can this issue now, no matter how the government is tackling this issue, now, say, for example, Mamata Banerjee, the poll-bound states will try and make this into an issue. Can this issue become into a political hot potato? Like Mamata Banerjee was saying that she's going to protest against the increasing prices. Congress has shot back.
Of course. I mean, as the political parties, the opposition parties should take the matter up. Why should we be surprised by that? Of course, they're going to take it up. Why wouldn't they take it up? Given that, inflation has been pretty horrendous. It might be down in the last 2 years or so, but the point is inflation has been significant in the following context, that wages have not been growing fast enough. So real wages are flat. Because if real wages are flat and if prices of various things keep on increasing, it means that, the ordinary people are not being able to consume so many other things. Because we keep asking, why is private investment not increasing? We keep asking, why is aggregate demand for scooters not increasing? For FMCG products, why is that demand not increasing? Only high-end product consumption continues to increase. SUVs continue to be bought, and scooter नहीं बिक रही, alto नहीं बिक रही, है ना? तो ये सब क्यों हो रहा है? ये सब इसी वजह से हो रहा है कि the ordinary consumer is taking a hit in a variety of ways.
No, but then again, yes. So like pointing out that
हाथ खड़े कर दिए.
No, I'm saying that the ordinary citizen is taking the hit in multiple ways, and here you have another burden of 60 rupees as far as the home cylinder is concerned. As far as the commercial cylinder is concerned, again there is an increase. So that's what precisely my point was, that ultimately it's boiling down to the burden on the common man.
Correct. So one last sentence just to say that the government could have absorbed it if it was willing to reduce the fertilizer subsidy, which itself is harming agriculture. If I was in the ministry if I was advising the government, that's what I would do.
Right. All right. So one quick comment from Ambassador Meera Shankar. So what's the situation in government's hand? Like what Professor Mehrotra explained, that if you cut down the fertilizer subsidy, then probably the burden couldn't have been passed on to the common man. So was this a situation where government could have controlled the situation, but it didn't absorb whatever the situation was and it passed on to the consumers?
It's a bit difficult immediately. It's something which will take a bit of time. And then there are various political constituencies which operate, which make it difficult to just take decisions on the basis of economic rationality. At least that is what I have seen in the past. So, yes, we should be cutting back the fertilizer subsidy, even otherwise, even if this crisis was not there. But we have not been able to do so because the farmers' lobby is an important lobby. And
Yes.
if you look at the overall terms of trade for agriculture versus the urban economy, then the terms of trade for agriculture have been actually getting worse for the farmer. So this is one thing which the government is very loath to
Yes.
do, but it needs to, because we need to rationalize. We are poisoning our soil also because of this,
Yes.
uh, whether it will happen, I don't know. But if any cuts are to be placed, then, as I said, cuts could be on gas for power generation, because we have enough thermal, renewable, and other sources of power, and gas for fertilizers also. Then we have gas cracker units, which is what our LPG was used for. And these are the areas where perhaps reductions could be made without impacting public welfare at large. I mean, or at least reducing or minimizing. I won't say without impacting, but minimizing or reducing the impact.
One
Right. So,
final point, if I might, Neelu. You
yes, sir.
see, in the last 11 years of this government's existence, it has been the beneficiary of a massive windfall gain. What do I mean by that? For a nearly 10-year period that the UPA was in power, all the way till early 2014, international oil prices were in the region of $100 or more per barrel. Okay. The oil prices, other than in 2021, when the Ukraine war started and the economic sanctions began on Russia, the oil prices have barely reached, when they reached $100. After that, for that limited period, for most of the period of the 11 years, the international oil prices have been below $80. They've only just, on account of this war, they've gone up to $80 plus. The point is, this government has been a massive beneficiary, and it has used or misused its windfall gains in essentially spreading freebies all around, and in badly utilizing its fiscal situation. It's cut taxes. It has not reduced subsidies where it should have. Had there been, a long-term vision, all of this could have been done. And if that had been done, there would have been fiscal space today. Today, the
Yes.
government is saying, oh, we don't have any fiscal space. Of course, you don't have any fiscal space, because you've been cutting taxes on the one hand, and you've been giving away money as well as borrowing massively, so that your interest costs have been rising. Your fiscal deficit to GDP ratio is still your debt to GDP ratio is shot up in the last 11 years. So you've managed the fisc
Absolutely. Yeah.
badly. That's really the bottom line.
Absolutely. So we'll have to wait and watch how things unfold. And the million-dollar question: how long the war continues? Will this LPG crisis also deepen as the time passes by? We'll have to wait and watch. For now, Mr. Chandra Prakash has assured that we have implemented ESMA, and we are expanding our production as far as LPG is concerned. So keep your fingers crossed. We all hope that there's no shortfall of the LPG in the country, because it's a direct impact on the family households. Thank you so much. We'll have to end it here. Ambassador Shankar, Professor Mehrotra, Chandra Prakash ji, thank you very much for joining.